The Iran-backed Houthis have threatened a strong response after the latest round of U.S. airstrikes in Yemen, further escalating fears of a broader regional war in the Middle East. This video shows the first round of U.S. and UK-led airstrikes launched a few days ago, hitting the Houthi military targets. Since then, the U.S. has carried out additional strikes targeting a radar site early on Saturday. This response comes after weeks of Houthi attacks on ships in the Red Sea. For more on those airstrikes and the first 100 days of that Israel-Hamas war, I'm joined by retired Admiral Mike Mullen, former chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff. Admiral Mullen, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good to be with you, Rosemary.
Let's start with these targeted airstrikes in Yemen, Admiral. Did they, in your view, achieve their intended purpose here, which I guess was to stop the Houthis from attacking ships and the Red Sea entirely?
Well, I really think, I think the intended purpose is to deter further Houthi attacks. We'll see. My understanding is we hit about 20% of the Houthi capabilities. There's been a second, smaller response as well. I think the overall message is that in conjunction, quite frankly, with our allies and actually a positive vote in the UN is that the Houthis have to cease these attacks, very specifically because they're causing such a big impact with respect to the global economy. If they don't, I think there'll be more. And an extension of that is where is Iran in all this? And I think Iran has the ability to control the Houthis, and they need to do that.
Well, I want to talk about the prospect of this being the beginning of a regional war, but I'll ask you about Iran first, because President Biden has said that the U.S. delivered a private message to Iran after they carried out that second strike. How do you interpret that? What do you think he means there?
One of my biggest concerns when October 7th occurred was whether this would break into a regional war. And the messaging from Nasrallah, who runs Hezbollah in Lebanon, the messaging from Iran is they don't want to do that. Yet these steps and where the Houthis seem to be headed is to try to broaden the war. So I think we're closer than we were when it started, and I do worry about that. I do think Iran has the wherewithal to make sure that doesn't happen. But we certainly seem to be headed in that direction.
So would you call this at this stage the beginning of a proxy war, or am I going too far in that assessment?
No, I think that this has been a proxy war from the beginning. When you look at Iran's long-standing support of Hezbollah in Lebanon, of the militias in Syria, of militias in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, there's no question that we're in a proxy war, which is a great strength of Iran. Mm-hmm. And in addition to thinking when October 7th occurred that Hamas, also supported by Iran, committed an act that is going to result in their elimination, and I really believe that. Quite frankly, I'm one that believes after 40 plus years of Iran, there's going to have to be something long-term that further isolates Iran because of their activity. They're really masters of the proxy space, if you will. Mm-hmm. I think the world is going to have to address how we put them in a position to essentially deter them and stop them in these kinds of operations.
Well, I wonder if that means that the coalition that was sort of behind these strikes, the U.S., the U.K., Canada, other allies, was that important to send that message to Iran, that this wasn't just about attacking a proxy war with one country, that this was a group of allies working together?
Yeah, I think that's really, really important, as was the vote in the United Nations, from which China and Russia, who are Iran's supporters, if you will, abstained, which is also significant, and I think sends that message to Iran. Iran is actually hurting themselves as well, because they get hurt when the global economy is impacted as it has been and will continue to be unless the Houthis stand down.
I asked Israel's ambassador to the UN last week on this program about a major Israeli military operation on the northern border with Lebanon. He said that if diplomacy fails, and the hope is that it won't, obviously, that Israel will use military means there too. How big a concern is that, do you think, an escalation at the northern border? Would Israel be able to do that, to have two conflicts going at once?
I think it's been a huge concern from the beginning, as I said, and I think it was Nasrallah's initial speech not too long after October 7th, which had a tone to it that was, I would say, moderate, if you will, indicating that they didn't really want to get involved. But I think I would never underestimate Israel's ability to defend itself. It's how they live, it's how they think. And so I very much believe that if something happens there, Israel will do all it can to make sure that that threat is eliminated as well.
Tell me from a military perspective, obviously, as you watch the Israeli offensive unfold in Gaza and the pressure on Israel to change its strategy, whether you've seen that shift in strategy, whether you believe that U.S. officials are having some success in telling Israel to be more patient and more deliberate.
Well, I think it's been obvious from the beginning that President Biden's full-throated support of Israel has made a big difference. That said, the back channel indications are that President Biden and others putting an enormous amount of pressure on Israel to be more precise, to reduce the casualties, to figure out how to support the humanitarian requirements, which are growing in Gaza over time. I don't know what the calendar is. There have been many reports that by the end of this month, that strategy really needs to be in place. I don't have any doubt that President Biden and others will continue to support Israel, but I think Israel's really going to have to adjust to vastly minimize the civilian casualties, or they're going to have a very difficult time sustaining the support they have from the West, in particular the United States.
The goal that Netanyahu has expressed many times to eradicate Hamas, do you believe that that is actually attainable? Because, as we know, Hamas is also an ideology and a set of beliefs.
Well, I don't want to parse words too carefully here. I've never been a fan of the word destroy because I don't think you can destroy an idea. But I do think you can actually really go a long way down the road towards eradication. And that takes time. This is going to take more time than any of us want. It's going to take more time, certainly, than Israel wants. But they're, over time, very good at this. And I think that needs to be the long-term goal. So Hamas no longer has any military capability and can never, of significance, and could never execute a kind of operation that they did on October 7th again in the future.
Let me ask you a quick question about Ukraine while you're here, if you don't mind, because obviously the aid for Ukraine is stuck both in the U.S. and the EU. Ukraine this week was calling for more air defense systems and missiles to defend itself. There are questions around whether the counteroffensive is going as well as it should, or whether it's dragging on a bit. Do you think that Ukraine is getting the support that it needs, that it still has the ability to win this war?
Well, I was encouraged in recent days to see both the UK and I think Germany came up with support in the billions of dollars. The EU, I think, overall wants to support. I think it's really just Orban in Hungary who's standing in the way. And clearly there are challenges here in the US that I think will overcome per se. But the counteroffensive did not go well. I don't know. I haven't believed from the beginning that President Zelensky and Ukraine are going to get the Crimea back at some point in the not too distant future. Everybody's patience and ability to support this, not just physically with weapons, but also politically, is going to start to wane. We need to get to the table as soon as we can to get some kind of resolution. That also takes Putin as well. He doesn't want to do that right now. And I think Putin's future needs to be threatened, if you will, strategically, before he'll move in that direction as well.
Admiral Mullen, so good of you to make some time for Canada and offer us your expertise. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Okay, hope you can come back sometime.